Okay, so where were you when you first heard about the attempted assassination?
Well, I was on travel with the Western Caucus. It's a group of members of Congress who are champions for rural America, ag and energy. And I was with my family, and we immediately turned on the news. I got phone calls and texts, but I think everybody was getting information, the same information, kind of real time. Then we turned the TV off and our phones off and got on our knees and prayed for the president. We prayed for the family who ultimately lost their dad and their husband and those others who were injured. So, and praying for the country that we would come out of this better and stronger, more unified, less divided. And so that's how we approached it. And like everybody else, we've been following it, and we've gotten some information through the formal chains of command in the United States House. But I think there are more questions than answers, which is why it's going to be so important that we follow up with oversight hearings from the Secret Service and every other, agency that was involved at all levels to find out how in the world could someone breach the way this person did and have such an obvious security compromise within 200 yards of the president and a clean line of sight. Something went wrong, something wasn't right, and we need to get to the bottom of it. We need to hold people accountable. We need to make sure it doesn't happen again, most importantly.
And how did it make you feel when you heard about what happened?
Oh, I was shocked. I think, first of all, I was thinking, please, Lord, don't let this assassination attempt be successful. And I prayed in my spirit for the president because I was informed that he'd been shot, but I didn't have any other information. I think the next thought I had was, what's this going to do to the country if he were shot and if he were killed? I think this would have been disastrous for the country. The country is divided, emotions are high. This election is probably the most consequential election in my lifetime, and the last thing we need is something like that to try to manage. I think the civil unrest would have been tremendous, and I worry about that. But thankfully that didn't happen. I think the next thoughts were, we need to work through this. We need to dial things back, take a step back, all people in political leadership, and make sure that we're setting the right example and that we're setting the right tone. I have for 8 years had the approach to my leadership role on behalf of West Texas to focus on policy, debate policy, and to fight for the policies that I think are best for the country, that represent the values and principles of the people of West Texas. But I've been also committed not to attack people, and I think that's the way we ought to approach the business of politics. I think everybody's weary of the back and forth that is got very little to do with policies and the consequences of policies. Quite frankly, the agenda and policies of these two presidents couldn't be more starkly different. So I would encourage my colleagues at all levels of government, but especially in Washington, condemn violence regardless of what side it's on. Be quick to condemn it. We got to hold people accountable who commit these acts of violence. I think our country is experiencing a rise in crime because we're not holding people accountable. But then I think political leaders ought to lead by example, ought to have, ought to be focused on policy instead of personal attacks, and that's not helpful. The fact is, people who do that take the shots in an attempted assassination, or the people who burn buildings down or assault law enforcement officers, those folks are responsible for their actions, and they don't get a pass by blaming politicians for their rhetoric. We've always had emotional and sometimes even vitriolic dialogue and rhetoric in politics in our country. Not saying that's good, I'm just saying that's no excuse for for what's happening in any situation where acts of violence are committed.
And as a public figure, is this event going to change? Does it make you nervous? And is it going to change how you move forward?
I just think it makes me and every member of Congress, my colleagues, and everybody, and quite frankly, in the public eye that's an elected office holder, more aware that there are very unstable people. I think we have a societal problem that goes much deeper than you can address by a piece of legislation in Washington, D.C. I think it's a breakdown of the family. I think it's the dark corners of the internet. I think it's the institutional breakdowns in our country. My point is, whether it's a school shooting or something like what happened in Pennsylvania, we've got societal problems that are deep-seated, some cultural problems that can't be addressed by merely a piece of legislation. So it reminds me of that, and that we all, whether you're in a school or you're a public figure, have to take all the necessary precautions.
And both former President Trump and President Biden have both expressed that they want to change the tone of this campaign. Do you think that's possible?
I think it is. I think they're right. I think everyone, as I said, should take a step back and reevaluate the rhetoric and focus on the policies. Like, that's how I've approached politics. I've been very civil in my discourse. I have friends on both sides of the aisle. I've passed legislation with my Democrat colleagues who've helped me, whether it was with Dyess or getting the highway I-27 Ports to Plain corridor, farm bill. So I just feel like a strong dose of West Texas values and common sense would go a long way in Washington. But I feel like we've led by example for 8 years. I'm very proud of how I've conducted myself and how I've treated my colleagues. And I hadn't had an ounce less passion for what I'm doing, or an ounce less fight for the future of my country and freedoms and opportunities and way of life for my children. I fight hard and I work hard, but I spend my time attacking the policies and the consequences, like our open border, like the cost of living crisis and the spending-induced inflation, like projecting weakness on the world stage, which is what has happened, in my opinion, for the last 3+ years under the Biden administration. But that's not a personal attack. That is my analysis of what's happening and the policies that have created disastrous effects for working families across West Texas and across the country. So I'm trying to do my part to lead by example. I think we've done that from day one.
And given the recent assassination attempt, is there any investigation going on in Congress? If so, where does it currently stand? You
better believe it. In fact, we had a conference call with members of the House and the Speaker, and he reassured us that we would be vigilant in our oversight efforts to find out what happened, why there was such a gaping hole in security, and who was responsible, why it went down, and ultimately who's accountable. And there are a lot of questions, not just on the security breach that allowed this crazy person to take a shot at the president, but there were requests from the Kennedy campaign and the Trump campaign for more security. They felt vulnerable. And what I understand is those requests to the Department of Homeland Security were denied. Now, since then, they've allowed for more security, but I want to know where Secretary Mayorkas was and what his thought process was to not accommodate both campaigns who felt like there was a heightened risk of an event like what happened this past weekend. So questions abound, more questions than we have answers, and I am committed to making sure that we vigilantly and diligently pursue every one of those questions until we have answers, and then we make the necessary decisions to correspond with the answers to those questions so it doesn't happen again. I think that's the most important, and that we hold people accountable, because as we say in Plainview, where I grew up, something ain't right with what went down, in Pennsylvania. And we got to get to the bottom of it. And that's going to be the first order of business when we get back to session next week.
And former President Trump just recently announced his VP selection. Do you agree with it?
I agree with it in that J.D. Vance is a good man. He's got a great personal story where he had a lot of family struggles. He talks about the growing up in a working class community, in a working class family, a community that struggled economically, that struggled with a drug epidemic, like we see in rural communities, even in West Texas. I think the most exciting thing about Senator Vance being vice president and the prospect of him being vice president is his commitment to the forgotten men and women in this country. For him, it's rural communities in the Rust Belt and those working people that work in manufacturing plants all through the Midwest. For me, it's the rural communities in West Texas and throughout the country. It's our ag and energy producers that provide energy independence and food security and that are the backbone of our nation's values. I know he's committed to that, as is President Trump, and I think there's alignment there. They both, Trump and Vance, share this sort of America First approach to conservative policies. And what I mean by that is they think border security is job one. They believe that we've been taken advantage of by the likes of China in terms of trade agreements. And they want to reset that because they feel like it's undermined the American worker and our American manufacturers and producers. And he's right. I think J.D. Vance also is very skeptical about getting involved in foreign wars and this sense that we have these endless international conflicts that we may or may not have a national security interest. He's a reluctant guy when it comes to engaging in those conflicts, as is President Trump. So the Republican Party has had a little bit of a shift in our worldview and in the view of the role of government. I think the basics are still there. J.D. Vance is for less government, lower taxes, a strong military. But I think that he's young, he's dynamic, he's intelligent, he's got a great story. He's one of us in terms of West Texas. I mean, he's lower to middle class, and he had to work hard to make it in business. He was very successful in business. And then decided he was going to get into politics and do something good for the country. And so he's got a similar path as Trump, but I think he's got a similar perspective, believe it or not, from the people of West Texas, given the communities that he has represented and the places that he's been from in Kentucky and in Ohio.
And we have about 4 more months left in the presidential campaign. Do you have any plans on campaigning for Trump?
Well, I'm campaigning for Trump everywhere I go and where it's appropriate, and it's not on in my official capacity, but I'm traveling the country, encouraging people to go to the polls and peacefully set a course for this country that is far different than the policies and the disastrous results of the policies we've experienced for almost 4 years. I mean, I don't think I have to do a lot or say a lot to motivate the American people at this point. I think for Republicans who support President Trump, I think the debate revealed that we have one president that is energized and leaning in to the agenda that gave us unprecedented prosperity in terms of job creation, the lowest poverty rates in recorded history, a secure border, stable world with America in the pole position, being a strong leader, comforting our allies and keeping our enemies at bay. The crime wasn't what it is today. I think the simple question for the American people, and I don't have to do much to remind them, is your life better off today under 4 years of the policies of this administration, whether it's Joe Biden at the top of the ticket or Kamala Harris? The policies weren't going to change. How do you like the results? How do you like your life? Are you safer? Is the country stronger? Are there more opportunities? Is the world safer? and more stable? I think the answer is obvious. And whether people like Trump, his style, his personality, I think that they trust that his policies are going to be better for the country. And I think I don't think I have to do a whole lot, but I'm very proud of having served with President Trump and all the good things that we were able to do. And I think there's more to come. And I pray and I hope, and I certainly have a lot of confidence in the American people that President Trump will get another 4 years. J.D. Vance will be our new vice president. And I think our best days will be ahead of us. But I think it's important, regardless of what happens, that we unify as a country and that we remind ourselves that we're Americans. We're all in the same boat. And our futures are linked, whether you're a Republican or Democrat. And we need to remember that we need to love our neighbor, and that we need to give each other the benefit of the doubt that we love the country, even if we have a different view on policy. I think that's important. I think if we remember the golden rule, and we remember that God's blessed this country, and if he chooses to bless us going forward, it'll be because we're honoring God with the way we treat each other. And that's not lost on me. And the people I represent in West Texas, I know they believe that with all their hearts. So they make it easy on me.
And now, just 48 hours after the attempted assassination, former President Trump was in attendance at the Republican National Convention. What does that say about him?
I tell you, the guy, a lot has been said about how tough he is. And I don't know anybody that's taken more flack over the years from all the sort of court cases that I think are weaponized, politicized cases from the DOJ in this administration, to just how he's been demonized, as a family's been attacked and vilified in every way you can, and he's staying the course. He jumps up from being shot at and missed with not inches but millimeters from losing his life, and he pumps his fist in the air and says, keep fighting, keep fighting. I think it speaks to his resolve and his commitment. And I think he's as undeterred and unrelenting in his pursuit to make America great again as he's ever been. And I think for most people who watched what happened and have rewatched it with more information and analysis, they probably think like I think, which is it's nothing short of a miracle that the guy is alive. And I think he's on a mission. And I pray that it's part of God's greater purpose, that he would use Donald Trump to restore the greatness of America. And because we know what made it great. It was our values. It wasn't the government. It wasn't a government program. It was the people, we the people, and the values of the American people. And I think President Trump's agenda is locked into those values and restoring them and renewing the American spirit, keeping the American dream alive. So I'm prayerful that he's going to be the man to lead this country over the next 4 years and make a major course correction from where we've been and where we are today.
And you previously helped write a few bills that benefited Dyess. Are there currently any funding mechanisms in the works for Dyess?
Well, we secured $30 million, which I understand is the most money outside of earmarks that we've ever gotten for the base and this community. I'm confident over the last 8 years that we have worked through the legislative process and the Armed Services Committee and the defense appropriators to make sure that we have a smooth transition from the B-1 to the B-21. That B-21 program has been fully funded every year. We passed legislation along with Senator Cruz to make sure that we had no disruption to the workforce at Dyess and consequently to our local economy. And we've done everything to make sure that our airmen, most importantly, are safe in doing the most important job that our government has for we the people, which is to protect us and to secure our liberty and our children's liberty into the future. So we need to give them the best tools to be safe and successful in their mission, and we've done that. The $30 million that we've invested for infrastructure to basically onboard the B-21 in the next few years, that's now out of the House and into the Senate. So I'm looking to Senator Cruz and Senator Cornyn and my colleagues in the Senate to make sure that those are locked in. But I feel really good about the position Dyess is in, and having the next generation bomber for the remainder of the 21st century and beyond. And I think it's awesome, because there's not a community in all the country that's been more supportive of their bomber bases and their airmen like Abilene, Texas. The Key City they are the exemplar. They have the mantle, and they've been recognized as such. And quite frankly, it makes my job a lot easier, because all that work that's been done and the reputation of this community that preceded me 8 years ago has made my job a lot easier. So my success, I give all the credit to the Military Affairs Committee, the Chamber of Commerce, and this entire community for the way they love and support their airmen and their families.
Thank you. Is there anything else you want to say to your community? Thank
you for letting me represent you and your families. Thank you for letting me fight for you in a way that best reflects the values of this community, and in a way that ensures that our children will have the same prospects for freedom and opportunity and security in an America they can be proud of. It's the honor of a lifetime for me, and it's not lost on me. And every day, with every fiber of my being, I'm working and fighting for that future, and I'm grateful that they let me do this on their behalf.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.